In the 3rd century before Christ, on the painted colonnade of Athens, a merchant son from Cyprus began teaching a philosophy that would reshape the entire course of Western thought. His name was Zeno of Citium, and he did not speak of escape from the world, but of mastery within it. He taught that nature itself is rational, that the universe operates according to divine reason, and that we, each of us, possess a fragment of that same logos. This is the story of how one man's shipwreck led to the birth of Stoicism, and how his radical idea that we can control our judgments became a philosophy for emperors and slaves alike. Zeno of Citium was born around 334 BCE into a merchant family of considerable means. His early life was marked by commerce and material accumulation, the pursuits that occupy most men. But fate, as it so often does, intervened with catastrophe. During a voyage transporting purple dye from Phoenicia, Zeno's merchant vessel was shipwrecked. In a single moment, his fortune dissolved into the sea, and with it, the conventional life he had been leading. This catastrophe, however, became the catalyst for transformation. Rather than returning to Cyprus to rebuild his merchant empire, Zeno made his way to Athens, the philosophical heart of the ancient world. There he encountered the Cynics, particularly Crates of Thebes, whose austere teachings about freedom from desire resonated with the wreckage of his former life. But Zeno was not content with mere rejection of material goods. He sought something deeper, a comprehensive philosophy of nature, reason, and virtue that could explain both the cosmos and the proper conduct of human life. For nearly 50 years, Zeno walked the Stoa Poikile, the painted colonnade in Athens, teaching his ideas to whoever would listen. He earned no great wealth from his teaching, charged no fees, and lived with deliberate simplicity. Yet his influence grew steadily. What emerged from his reflection on shipwreck, loss, and the human condition was not a philosophy of despair, but one of remarkable clarity. That our true nature is rational, and that by aligning ourselves with reason and virtue, we achieve unshakable peace, eudaimonia, or flourishing. At the heart of Zeno's philosophy lies a concept so profound it shaped nearly 2 millennia of Western thought: the logos, the rational principle that pervades the entire universe. Zeno inherited this idea partly from the pre-Socratics, particularly Heraclitus, but he refined it into a metaphysical and ethical system of extraordinary coherence. For Zeno, the universe is not chaotic or indifferent. It is animated by reason, divine reason, permeating every atom of existence. This is not merely abstract theology, it has immediate practical implications. If the universe operates according to rational principles, then our task as human beings is to understand those principles and align our will with them. The cosmos is like a vast organism with providence, divine intelligence, as its animating principle. This logos manifests in different forms. In inanimate matter, it appears as physical law. In living things, it appears as the principle of growth and life. In animals, it appears as instinct and sensation. But in human beings, it achieves its highest expression: rational consciousness, the capacity to understand the underlying structure of reality and to choose virtue accordingly. Zeno taught that this human reason, this fragment of the divine logos within us, is not something we must develop artificially. It is our nature. When we act according to reason, we are not imposing an external constraint. We are fulfilling our deepest nature. This is the core insight that would liberate countless later Stoics from paralysis. Virtue is not a burden imposed by society or religion. It is the natural expression of what we truly are. To live according to nature is, for human beings, to live according to reason. In the philosophical marketplace of Athens, Zeno's contemporaries offered competing visions of the good life. Epicurus taught that pleasure was the highest good. The academics questioned whether we could know anything at all. But Zeno advanced a claim that was both radical and clarifying. Virtue, moral excellence, the correct use of reason, is the only true good. This is not mere ethical theory, it is a metaphysical claim with staggering implications. Health, wealth, reputation, honor, pleasure, all the things that most humans spend their lives pursuing, Zeno classified as preferred indifference. They are neither good nor evil in themselves. They are preferable to their opposites, certainly, but they do not determine our flourishing. Only virtue does that. Consider the implications. A person may lose their wealth in a moment, as Zeno himself did. They may lose their health to disease, their reputation to slander, their loved ones to death. But they cannot lose virtue, that is, their capacity to choose rightly, to act according to reason, unless they abandon it themselves. Virtue alone is entirely within our control. This doctrine liberated Zeno's followers from an anxiety that still haunts modern life, the terror of losing what we have built. If virtue is the only true good, then the person of wisdom need not fear fortune. They need not grovel before the powerful or compromise their principles to secure material advantage. This is why Zeno could teach a philosophy equally suited to emperors and slaves. The slave cannot be prevented from being virtuous, and neither can the emperor escape the consequences of vice. Zeno's radical claim was this: that true prosperity and true poverty are conditions of the soul, not the wallet. The virtuous person, stripped of everything, remains infinitely richer than the vicious person surrounded by treasures. One of Zeno's most enduring contributions to philosophy, one that would echo through Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, is the careful distinction between what lies within our control and what does not. This simple-seeming division unlocks an entire philosophy of freedom and peace. Within our control are our judgments, our desires, our aversions, our choices, in short, the operations of our will and reason. These are up to us, in the Greek phrase that later Stoics would emphasize, ephemin. Outside our control is everything else: our body, our health, our property, our reputation, our relationships, even our life itself. These are given to us as instruments to use. They are not ours to possess or command. The profound wisdom here is not pessimistic, but liberating. When we accept that most of what happens to us is beyond our control, we free ourselves from the desperate struggle to dominate circumstances that are inherently indomitable. Instead, we can focus our entire energy on the one arena where we truly possess sovereignty: our judgment, our will, our choice to act according to reason. Zeno taught his students to examine their reactions to events with unprecedented rigor. When something unfortunate occurs, loss, injury, public shame, the wise person does not blame the external circumstance. They examine their judgment about that circumstance. Have I judged this thing to be evil? Have I decided that it diminishes my worth? These judgments are not facts about the world. They are choices we make, and choices, by definition, lie within our control. This doctrine produced a remarkable practical result. Stoics could maintain equanimity in the face of turmoil, not through denial or numbness, but through philosophical clarity about what truly matters and what truly lies within their power. Zeno's students were not escapists. They were warriors of reason, fighting for mastery over the only thing that could ever truly be mastered: themselves. Zeno's universe was deterministic. Every event that occurs was predetermined by the eternal chain of cause and effect that constitutes the Logos. This is not mere fatalism or resigned pessimism. Zeno's determinism is paired with divine providence, the assurance that the universe unfolds according to divine intelligence toward rational ends. Here emerges one of the central tensions in Stoic philosophy, one that Zeno himself grappled with. How can human freedom and moral responsibility coexist in a predetermined universe? The answer lies in understanding that freedom is not the absence of causation, but the alignment of one's will with reason and nature. Consider a top spinning on a table. Once set in motion, its trajectory is fully determined by the laws of physics. Yet we do not say the top acts without reason. It acts according to its nature and the forces acting upon it. Similarly, the human being who acts according to reason acts in harmony with universal nature, even though their action was always destined to occur. Freedom, then, is not the ability to escape causation. It is the ability to act rationally within the causal order. Zeno taught that events unfold according to providence, but our rational assent to those events is where our agency truly lies. We cannot always control what happens to us, but we can control whether we assent to destructive judgments about those events. This is where human dignity resides, not in escaping the causal order, but in conscious participation in it through reason. This seemingly paradoxical doctrine produced a striking psychological effect in Zeno's followers. They developed a kind of serene acceptance of events without becoming passive. They worked vigorously to achieve their goals while maintaining equanimity about outcomes. They acted as though their choices mattered, because morally they do, while knowing that everything was always destined to unfold as it does. This is the distinctive poise of Stoicism, passionate engagement with a predetermined world. Zeno introduced a concept that would become central to Stoic ethics, oikeiosis, often translated as familiarization or natural affinity. This doctrine holds that all living creatures have an innate drive towards self-preservation and the preservation of their own well-being. This is not learned. It is built into the very fabric of nature. But here is where Zeno made a crucial distinction. In animals, this instinct for self-preservation operates purely through sensation and appetite. A creature seeks food, shelter, and reproduction according to immediate bodily impulse. But in human beings, something extraordinary occurs. This same fundamental drive toward well-being becomes informed by reason. The human being alone can reflect on their own nature and ask, what truly constitutes my well-being? What is genuinely beneficial for a rational creature? Through this reflection, Zeno argued, we come to see that virtue, living according to reason, is our true good. We develop an affinity not merely for physical preservation, but for moral excellence. We move from infantile self-interest toward mature understanding that our genuine flourishing lies in virtue, in justice, in wisdom, in the harmonious functioning of reason within ourselves and in society. This doctrine is profoundly humane. It does not demand that we suppress our natural desires or mortify ourselves through asceticism. Rather, it invites us to mature, to expand our understanding of what we truly are and what we truly need. A child clings to candy. An adult understands nutrition. A morally immature person clings to reputation and wealth. A virtuous person understands that character is what truly nourishes the soul. Zeno saw the path to virtue not as a violent conquest of our nature, but as its flowering, a natural development as we come to understand our own rational nature more deeply. This is perhaps why his philosophy could attract such diverse followers. It appealed to something fundamental in human nature itself, to our capacity for growth and self-understanding. In the tumultuous world of the Hellenistic age, an age of competing city-states, empires, and wars, Zeno preached a revolutionary idea, that all human beings are citizens of a single, universal city. The Greek word for city is polis. Zeno's universal city is the cosmopolis, the cosmos city. From this emerges the concept of cosmopolitanism that still resonates today. This was not naive idealism or religious mysticism. It was grounded in Zeno's understanding of the logos. Since all humans share in the same divine reason that animates the cosmos, all humans are fundamentally related to one another. The distinctions that divide us, nationality, class, legal status, are secondary to this deeper kinship. Diogenes Laertius reports that Zeno wrote that we ought not to live as if divided by city walls, but should regard all humans as fellow citizens. This principle cut radically against the grain of his time. In ancient Athens and across the Greek world, there were profound legal and social distinctions between citizens and non-citizens, between Greeks and barbarians, between free people and slaves. Zeno's philosophy suggested that these distinctions, however legally real, did not reflect the deeper reality of human nature. This vision produced remarkable practical consequences. Later Stoics like Epictetus, himself a freed slave, and Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on earth, both affirmed this cosmopolitan principle. It did not lead them to naive denial of actual inequalities, but to a profound ethical commitment that every human being, regardless of status, possessed dignity through their capacity for reason and virtue. Zeno's cosmopolitanism is neither naive nor totalitarian. It does not deny legitimate differences in role and relationship. Rather, it grounds all human relationships in a recognition of shared humanity and shared participation in the divine logos. It suggests that our ultimate loyalty must be to reason itself, to the universal order, and to the welfare of all humans as rational creatures. For nearly 50 years, Zeno taught in the painted colonnade, the Stoa Poikile, in the heart of Athens. The Stoa was not a university in any formal sense. It was a public space where anyone might come to listen. Zeno asked nothing of his students but attention and honest engagement with reason. His method was distinctly Socratic, though evolved beyond Socrates' own practice. Rather than leading students through aporia, the acknowledgement of ignorance, as Socrates did, Zeno presented a comprehensive system of philosophy grounded in physics, logic, and ethics. Yet he maintained the Socratic commitment to dialogue and rational examination. His students were encouraged to question, to test the doctrine against their experience, to work through its implications. What distinguished the Stoa under Zeno was its integration of all branches of philosophy into a coherent whole. Logic was not pursued for its own sake, but as a tool for understanding nature and determining right action. Physics was not mere curiosity about how the world worked, but a means of understanding the divine order we must align ourselves with. Ethics was the culmination of logic and physics, the practical wisdom about how to live. Zeno himself wrote prolifically. Diogenes Laertius reports that he composed over 300 works, though none survive intact. What we know of his teachings comes through later Stoics who refined and developed his ideas. Cleanthes, Chrysippus, and eventually the great voices of Roman Stoicism. But the Stoa itself became more important than any single text. It was a living tradition, a community of rational inquiry that persisted for centuries. Men from all walks of life gathered there, wealthy Athenians, slaves, foreigners, women. They came because they sensed in Zeno's teaching something that addressed the deepest human longings: how to live with integrity, how to maintain peace of mind amid chaos, how to find meaning in a vast and often indifferent universe. Zeno painted a portrait of human excellence that became the model for all subsequent Stoic thought. The sophos, the wise man or sage. This is not merely a virtuous person or a morally decent human. This is the ideal type toward which Stoic practice aims, a figure of almost transcendent clarity and steadiness. The Stoic sage possesses complete virtue, which means complete understanding of the nature of things and complete harmony between their will and the universal order. They have eradicated all destructive emotions, fear, anger, excessive grief, not through suppression, but through the corrected judgment that sees these emotions as based on false beliefs about what is good and evil. The sage experiences appropriate emotional responses, what the Stoics called pathia, the proper feelings, but not the irrational passions that torment ordinary humans. Crucially, the Stoic sage is indifferent to externals. They do not cling to health or reject illness, do not grasp at reputation or shrink from shame, do not hoard wealth or despair in poverty. They have understood at the deepest level that none of these things truly belongs to them or determines their worth. This produces a remarkable freedom, what later Stoics would call apatheia, not the modern meaning of indifference or lack of feeling, but freedom from pathological suffering through the correction of judgment. Was Zeno claiming that he himself was such a sage? The sources suggest he was remarkably humble about this. Later Stoics, particularly Chrysippus, would spend considerable philosophical energy debating whether perfect wisdom was actually achievable by any human being. The point was not that the sage was a fantasy, but that the ideal provided a direction for effort, a measure against which one could orient one's life. For Zeno's students, the sage became something more than an abstract ideal. It became a figure of extraordinary power and freedom. To contemplate the sage was to see what a human being could become if they fully understood and lived according to reason. And if such a thing were possible, even if one fell short, one could still direct one's whole life toward that goal. Zeno died around 262 BCE, having taught for nearly half a century. He had seen his philosophy grow from the musings of a shipwrecked merchant to a movement with real influence in Athens. He had trained successors, most notably Cleanthes, who would continue the Stoa after his death, and established a tradition that would prove remarkably durable. What happened after Zeno's death is one of the most remarkable stories in the history of philosophy. His immediate successors, Cleanthes and especially Chrysippus, refined and systematized his thought, wrestling with some of the internal tensions he had left unresolved. particularly the problem of how human freedom could exist in a deterministic universe. But more remarkably still, Stoicism began to spread beyond Athens. It attracted the attention of intellectuals throughout the Hellenistic world. When Rome rose to dominance, Stoicism found in Roman culture a civilization that seemed to crave its teachings. Roman virtues, duty, resolve, acceptance of fate, aligned naturally with Stoic principles. By the time we reach the Roman imperial period, Stoicism had become the dominant philosophy of educated Romans. Seneca, the wealthy tutor of Nero, taught Stoicism while navigating the treacherous politics of the imperial court. Epictetus, a former slave, taught that a human being could maintain absolute inner freedom even in chains. And Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on earth, kept a journal reminding himself of Stoic principles, a journal that would become the Meditations. What is remarkable is how little Zeno's core insights had to change to address this entirely different world. The physics needed updating, the doctrine of the sage needed refinement. But the fundamental claim that virtue is the only true good, that our flourishing depends on aligning our will with reason and nature, that we control only our judgments, remained as vital and as radical in the courts of Caesar as it had been in the painted colonnade of Athens. If we distill Zeno's entire philosophy to a single principle, it would be this: live according to nature. But this phrase, seemingly simple, contains immense depth and requires careful unpacking to understand what Zeno truly meant. For Zeno, nature operates at multiple levels. There is the nature of the cosmos as a whole, the universal order governed by the logos, the divine rationality that permeates all things. There is the nature of humanity as a species, rational animals with the capacity for virtue. And there is the nature of each individual human being, their particular circumstances, relationships, and capacities. To live according to nature means to understand these levels and to act in harmony with all of them. It means to recognize that you are part of a rational universe and to accept your role within it. It means to develop and exercise your specifically human capacity for reason and virtue. And it means to fulfill the particular duties and relationships that constitute your individual existence, as a parent, a citizen, a friend, a member of a household. This is profoundly different from what the phrase "live according to nature" might suggest to a modern ear. It does not mean living like an animal, following every impulse and appetite. Rather, it means understanding that human nature is distinguished by reason, and therefore living according to human nature means living according to reason. Zeno's principle also implies a kind of naturalistic ethics. We do not need to consult abstract rules or divine commandments to know how to live. We need only examine human nature carefully and ask, what is the proper functioning of a human being? What would a rational creature naturally aim at? The answer emerges from this examination: virtue, the excellences of character that allow a rational creature to flourish. This principle had tremendous liberating power. It meant that ethics was not an external imposition, but the discovery of our deepest nature. When we act virtuously, we are not subordinating ourselves to oppressive rules. We are becoming fully ourselves. Zeno of Citium left no written works that survive to our own time. What he left behind was something more enduring, a living tradition of thought and practice that would shape the intellectual and spiritual lives of millions of humans across 2,000 years. His specific doctrines were refined, debated, and sometimes transformed by his successors. Chrysippus would wrestle more deeply with logic and the problem of determinism. Later Stoics would develop his ideas about cosmopolitanism and social duty in ways he might not have anticipated. But the core insight, that human flourishing consists in virtue, that virtue is achieved through aligning our will with reason and nature, that we need not be enslaved by fear of externals, this remained the beating heart of Stoicism. What is remarkable is how practical this philosophy proved to be. It was not merely abstract theory, it was a way of life, a method for enduring hardship, for maintaining integrity under pressure, for finding meaning in a cosmos that does not revolve around human wishes. Roman generals used Stoic principles to face death with courage. Slaves used them to maintain dignity in bondage. Emperors used them to resist corruption and cruelty. In his own time, Zeno was not the most famous philosopher in Athens. Epicureanism had more followers, and the Academy of Plato had more prestige. But across the centuries, his influence deepened and spread until Stoicism became perhaps the most influential philosophical school in Western history. Zeno did not aim for immortal fame or historical influence. Those would have been externals, indifference from the Stoic perspective. He aimed at truth and at the liberation of human beings through right understanding. That he achieved both is evident in the fact that a philosophy born in ancient Athens, taught by a man who asked nothing of his students but attention and good faith, continues to address the deepest human longings 2,000 years after his death. We stand where Zeno stood, in a universe indifferent to our hopes and fears, subject to forces beyond our control. The difference is that we possess his insight, the hard-won wisdom of a man whose shipwreck became enlightenment. Zeno taught that this universe, for all its chaos and suffering, is governed by reason, not a sentimental reason that promises us comfort, but a rigorous, impersonal reason that orders all things according to law. In aligning our will with this reason, we do not escape the suffering that comes to all creatures. We transcend the suffering that comes from resistance to reality. Consider what this means in practice. When you face loss of wealth, of health, of loved ones, you stand at a crossroads that Zeno mapped with terrible clarity. You can insist that the world should conform to your wishes, that these things should not have happened. This resistance is natural, even understandable, but it is also the root of anguish. Or you can step back and see the loss as part of the seamless unfolding of nature, as the working out of causes set in motion before you were born, and ask, what in this moment lies within my control? Not the loss itself, but my judgment about it, my choice about how to respond, my decision about what kind of person this circumstance calls me to be. This is not resignation. It is not passivity. The Stoic sage is not a statue, unmoved and unfeeling. Rather, the Stoic is awake in a way that most humans are not. They see clearly what is truly theirs and what is not. They invest their energy where it counts, in the cultivation of wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. They act vigorously in the world, but without clinging to outcomes they cannot control. 2,000 years have passed since Zeno taught in the painted colonnade. Empires have risen and fallen. The world he knew has vanished. Yet the fundamental situation of human life remains unchanged. We are still rational creatures in a rational universe. We still face circumstances beyond our control. We still possess, in each moment, the freedom to choose our response. In that freedom lies our dignity, our virtue, and the peace that Zeno promised. Not the peace of escape from the world, but the peace of understanding our place within it and accepting the role we are called to play.